Maria Sanchez had never been the fastest, the strongest, or the most gifted. Growing up in a small Texas town, she had been the one teachers described as quiet but determined. Her parents, both Mexican immigrants, had sacrificed everything to give her a chance at a better life, and she had promised herself she would never waste that chance. That was why, at 19, she stood in combat boots, sweat dripping into her eyes, staring at an obstacle course that looked like something out of a nightmare. She hadn't joined the army on a whim. The decision had been brewing for years. After high school, while her friends scattered some to college, some to jobs, some to nowhere at all, Maria felt stuck. College was too expensive, and working dead-end jobs wasn't enough. She wanted purpose, structure, something bigger than herself. The army offered all of it. Recruiters had promised opportunities, education, and most importantly, transformation. "We'll make you stronger than you ever imagined," they said. Maria had believed them, but reality was merciless. The first week of basic training broke her illusions quickly. Her bunkmates sprinted across the obstacle course with effortless power, scaling wooden walls, vaulting trenches, swinging across ropes. Maria trailed behind, panting, slipping, falling. Mud clung to her uniform, sweat drenched her shirt, and shame burned her face. Every failure echoed like a drumbeat in her mind. Too slow, too weak, too soft. By the third day, whispers started. "She's dead weight," one recruit muttered, as Maria scrambled unsuccessfully up the cargo net. "She won't last a week." Another snickered when she collapsed during a timed run. Maria heard them all. She tried to shut it out, but words carried heavier than gear. The platoon began avoiding her during team drills, frustrated that she dragged them down. She saw the disappointment in their eyes when her mistakes forced the whole unit to repeat exercises. In the army, one person's weakness was everyone's burden. At night, while the others laughed quietly or wrote letters home, Maria sat on her bunk rubbing blistered feet and swollen knees. She thought about quitting almost every night. Her pride was the only thing holding her back. Back home, she had promised her parents she would endure. She couldn't stand the thought of returning defeated, her neighbors whispering that she had failed. But each day, the evidence piled higher. During rifle training, her shots scattered wildly. On the confidence course, she froze halfway across a rope bridge, paralyzed with fear. During a simulation exercise, she ducked too long behind cover, forgetting to advance, leaving her squad exposed. The drill sergeants didn't bother yelling anymore. They just shook their heads. One even muttered, "Hopeless," under his breath. The humiliation cut deeper than any bruise. Still, Maria clung to stubbornness. After lights out, while the others slept, she would sneak back to the field. Alone under the stars, she practiced climbing ropes, dragging her body across the dirt, repeating movements until her muscles screamed. She wasn't improving fast enough, but she refused to stop trying. Sweat turned cold on her back, tears stung her eyes, but she whispered to herself, "I won't quit. I can't quit." Yet the doubts lingered. Her body was breaking down. Her knees ached constantly. Her shoulders throbbed from failed pull-ups, and her lungs burned during every run. Her mind wasn't much better. Each mistake replayed endlessly, like a cruel film stuck on repeat. She feared she was proving everyone right, that maybe she wasn't meant for this. The breaking point came during a joint combat simulation in the third month. The exercise was designed to test decision-making under stress. Smoke, shouting, simulated gunfire, explosions. Maria's heart hammered as she crouched with her squad, waiting for the signal. The second the whistle blew, everyone leapt into action, everyone except Maria. Her legs refused to move. Her brain screamed, "Go, go, go," but her body froze. The others surged ahead, returning fire, advancing tactically. Maria stayed behind cover, clutching her rifle like a lifeline, unable to step into the chaos. The simulation ground to a halt when her hesitation left the squad exposed. The drill sergeant stormed toward her, fury blazing. "What the hell was that, Sanchez?" he roared. Maria couldn't answer. Her throat had closed, her chest tight, her face burning with shame. The rest of the squad glared at her as they marched back, defeated because of her. That night, Maria didn't practice alone. She sat on her bunk, staring at her hands, trembling. For the first time, she truly considered quitting. Maybe the army wasn't for her. Maybe she had been foolish to think she could belong. She pictured herself walking away, returning home to Texas, working at the diner where she'd once waited tables. She imagined the pitying looks, the whispered, "She couldn't make it." The thought twisted like a knife. She clenched her fists. She couldn't bear it. Not yet. Somewhere inside, a small flame flickered. She wasn't ready to snuff it out. What Maria didn't know was that her struggle had not gone unnoticed. Among the observers during that disastrous simulation was a visiting Navy SEAL commander named Lieutenant Harris. Known for his unshakable discipline and brutal standards, Harris was a legend in military circles. Most recruits feared even the mention of SEALs, imagining them as superhuman warriors. Harris, standing at the edge of the training field, saw what others dismissed. A soldier drowning in doubt, but refusing to quit. As the others laughed at Maria's mistakes, Harris watched her quietly. Something about her clumsy determination caught his attention. He had trained elite fighters, broken men down, and rebuilt them stronger. Failure didn't bother him. Quitting did. And Maria, despite every humiliation, hadn't quit. For the first time in weeks, Maria wasn't completely invisible. But she didn't know that yet. That night, as she lay awake listening to the steady breathing of her bunkmates, Maria stared at the ceiling and whispered a promise into the darkness. "Tomorrow, I will try again." She had no idea that her entire life was about to change, not through more punishment, not through drills or lectures, but through a single order from the very man she feared most. The next morning, Maria woke with a heaviness in her chest. Her body ached like it had been trampled, but it wasn't the bruises or sore muscles that weighed her down. It was the humiliation. The failed simulation replayed endlessly in her mind. Each second like salt rubbed into an open wound. The sharp whistle, the roar of gunfire, the way her legs locked when she was supposed to charge forward. And then the drill sergeant's roar, echoing in front of her entire platoon. What the hell was that, Sanchez? She wanted to crawl out of her skin. At breakfast, the chatter around the mess hall was louder than usual, recruits swapping stories, laughing, venting about the week's grueling drills. Maria sat quietly, pushing scrambled eggs around her tray, appetite gone. She felt their stares, even when no one spoke directly. Finally, one soldier broke the silence. "Thanks for yesterday, Sanchez," Private Lee muttered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Great job getting us all killed." A ripple of laughter spread around the table. Maria lowered her gaze, cheeks burning. She didn't argue. She couldn't. After the meal, the platoon marched to the training field. Maria's feet dragged with each step. She wondered how many more days she could endure this. The army had promised transformation, but all she felt was brokenness. That was when she noticed him. At the far edge of the field stood a man in a different uniform, darker and sharper than the army fatigues. His posture radiated authority, his presence quiet but undeniable. Lieutenant Harris. Maria had heard whispers about him since the day he arrived for joint observation. "SEAL Commander," the other said in hushed tones. "The kind of guy who eats fire for breakfast." She didn't expect him to notice her. Why would he? She was the weakest link, the one everyone mocked. Yet as her platoon lined up for drills, she caught his eyes scanning the group, and for a fleeting moment, his gaze landed directly on her. She felt exposed, as if he could see every failure etched into her skin. The morning passed in brutal repetition. Push-ups, sprints, combat, crawls. Maria stumbled through each, falling behind, dragging herself across the dirt. Sweat burned her eyes, her lungs clawed for air. She felt the sneers around her like daggers. Every stumble seemed to confirm what everyone already believed, that she didn't belong here. By the time the whistle blew for dismissal, Maria could barely stand. She trudged toward the barracks, desperate for a shower and a moment alone. Private Sanchez. The voice stopped her cold. Deep, steady, commanding. She turned and saw him, Lieutenant Harris, walking toward her. Every instinct screamed to brace herself. A SEAL commander didn't waste words on rookies unless he was about to cut them down. "Yes, sir," she stammered, heart racing. He stopped a few feet away, arms crossed, studying her. His eyes were sharp, but not cruel. He didn't look at her like the others did, with contempt or pity. He looked at her as if he were trying to solve a puzzle. "You froze yesterday," he said flatly. Maria swallowed hard, shame flooding back. "Yes, sir." He tilted his head. "Do you want to keep failing?" The question struck harder than a shout. For a second, she thought she'd misheard. His tone wasn't mocking. It wasn't even angry. It was calm, almost surgical. Maria's voice caught. She wanted to defend herself, to explain that she was trying, that she stayed up nights practicing, that she wanted this more than anything. But the words jammed in her throat. Harris didn't press. He waited, eyes fixed on hers, as if the silence itself was a test. Finally, she whispered, "No, sir." "Then fight differently," he said. Just like that, he turned and walked away, leaving Maria standing in stunned silence. The simplicity of it gnawed at her. Fight differently. It wasn't a lecture about grit or toughness, nothing about digging deeper or sucking it up like the drill sergeants barked every day. It was something else. That night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, his words echoing in her mind. "Do you want to keep failing? Fight differently." She thought about every moment she had collapsed, panicked, or fallen behind. She always fought the same way, charging in blindly, throwing everything she had into brute effort. When that failed, she fought harder, more desperately, until exhaustion crushed her. She had never considered there might be another way. The next morning, Maria moved differently. She arrived early to the field, stretching quietly while the others straggled in. Her body was still battered, but she forced herself to focus on Harris's words. Fight differently. What did that mean? She didn't know yet, but she knew one thing. If she kept doing what she had been doing, she would fail. During drills, she stopped comparing herself to others. When they sprinted ahead, she concentrated on her own pace. When her body screamed, she tried not to panic. She failed plenty, still lagged, still stumbled, but something in her shifted. For the first time, she wasn't just reacting blindly. She was searching, experimenting, adjusting. Harris noticed. He didn't intervene again. Not yet. He stood at a distance, arms folded, watching. Each time Maria looked up, she found his eyes on her, unreadable. It made her skin prickle, but it also lit something inside her, a spark of accountability. Someone saw her. Someone was measuring whether she would break or rise. Her platoon didn't understand. "She's still trash," one soldier muttered after Maria barely cleared a wall. "What's Harris wasting his time on her for?" Maria heard it, but for once, the words didn't cut as deep. Harris's question echoed louder than their mockery. "Do you want to keep failing?" No, she didn't. She wanted to fight differently. And though she didn't know it yet, Harris had already decided he was going to teach her how. The next dawn broke over the training base with a dull gray sky. Clouds smudged like ash across the horizon. Maria was already awake, sitting on the edge of her bunk, lacing her boots with trembling fingers. She hadn't slept much. Harris's words had haunted her all night. Fight differently. She still didn't know exactly what that meant. She only knew that today had to be different. The whistle blew. Recruits scrambled to formation, bleary-eyed and grumbling. Maria fell in line, spine stiff, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel. Her muscles were sore, but her mind buzzed with restless determination. After roll call, the platoon headed to the obstacle field. The air smelled of wet earth from last night's rain. Wooden walls glistened with moisture, ropes sagged with dampness, and the ground squished under boots. The sergeants barked orders, and one by one, the recruits launched into the grueling course. Maria's heart pounded as she approached the first wall. She had failed this obstacle more times than she could count, sliding down in front of everyone. She wiped her palms on her fatigues, preparing to jump Private Sanchez. Her body froze at the sound. She turned. Standing a few paces away, arms crossed, was Lieutenant Harris. His presence was like a thundercloud, heavy, inescapable. The other recruits stole glances, whispering. "Sir," Maria managed, throat dry. "Follow me." The platoon continued their drills as Harris led her toward an empty corner of the field. Maria's stomach churned. Was he about to dismiss her? Order her out of training? Her failures were enough to justify it. They stopped near a low wall slick with mud. Harris studied her silently for several seconds, his gaze sharp, unflinching. Maria shifted uneasily, waiting for the blow. Instead, he spoke just 3 words. "Breathe before you move." Maria blinked. "Sir, breathe before you move." His tone carried no explanation, no softness, just command. Confusion tangled in her chest. She had expected a lecture, maybe another cutting question. Not this. Breathing? That was it? "Try it," Harris said, nodding to the wall. Maria turned toward the obstacle, heart pounding. She inhaled sharply, too quick, then scrambled upward. As usual, her grip slipped on the wet wood, and she tumbled back, landing with a grunt. Mud smeared her uniform. She braced for Harris's disappointment. Again, she obeyed. This time, she paused at the base, trying to breathe deliberately, though nerves made it shaky. She jumped, grabbed, pulled, and slipped again. Again, over and over, she tried. Each time, Harris's voice repeated like a drumbeat. "Breathe before you move." Maria's arms ached, her knees scraped, frustration bubbling hotter with every failure. She wanted to scream that breathing wasn't the problem, that her body just wasn't built for this. But Harris's eyes never wavered. He wasn't mocking, wasn't impatient. He was waiting, as if certain she would figure something out. On her 7th attempt, Maria stopped. She closed her eyes, blocking out the whispers from the platoon, the sting of failure, the fear of more humiliation. She inhaled slowly, filling her lungs, then exhaled. Then she jumped. Her hands caught the top. Muscles strained, but instead of panicked flailing, she moved with steady control. She pulled, kicked, pressed upward, and for the first time, she hauled herself over the wall. She landed on the other side, chest heaving. Shock flickered across her face. She had done it. Harris's expression barely changed, but the faintest nod told her he'd expected nothing less. "Again," he said. She repeated the process, this time more deliberate. Breath first, then movement. Again she cleared the wall, and again. Each repetition was smoother, less frantic. Something clicked inside her. It wasn't strength she'd been missing it was control. The rest of the platoon had stopped pretending not to watch. Murmurs rippled through the group. Maria Sanchez, the weak link, was climbing walls she had never cleared before. By the time Harris dismissed her, mud streaked her uniform and sweat soaked her shirt, but her eyes burned with something new, belief. "Sir," she asked cautiously as he turned to leave. "Why just breathing?" Harris paused, glancing back. "Because panic wastes energy. Control wins fights. You can't control a battlefield if you can't control yourself." With that, he walked away, leaving her stunned. That night, Maria didn't just practice until exhaustion. She practiced breathing. She sat cross-legged on the floor, inhaling deeply, exhaling slowly, timing her movements with each breath. She tried it before push-ups, before lifting her rucksack, even before laying down to sleep. The simplicity of it was almost ridiculous, yet it anchored her like nothing else had. The next morning, she approached every drill differently. Before sprints, she steadied her breath. Before crawling under barbed wire, she inhaled deeply, exhaled, then moved. She wasn't faster than the others, not yet, but she wasn't frantic. She felt composed. Her squad noticed. "Since when can Sanchez keep up?" Private Lee muttered during a run, half joking, half incredulous. "She's not slowing us down anymore," another replied, slightly grudging. Maria heard them. But for once, their words didn't sting. Instead, they fueled her. Still, progress wasn't magic. She stumbled plenty. During rifle practice, she missed more shots than she hit. During long-distance runs, she lagged near the back. But each time she faltered, she remembered Harris's command, "Breathe before you move." And each time, it steadied her enough to continue. The biggest test came during a timed endurance course a week later. Rain pelted the field, turning dirt into slippery sludge. Recruits cursed as they ran, sliding across the terrain. Maria started near the back. As usual, halfway through, her lungs burned, her legs screamed. Panic clawed at her old instincts, urging her to rush, to flail desperately for speed. She almost gave in. Then she remembered. She slowed for a beat, inhaled, exhaled, and surged forward. Her pace was steady, her footing careful. She didn't finish first. She didn't even finish in the middle. But she crossed the line upright, not collapsed in the mud. Harris stood at the finish, arms crossed. Their eyes met briefly. His nod was subtle, but Maria felt it like a medal pinned to her chest. For the first time since arriving at basic training, she believed she might actually belong. Rain hammered down on the training grounds, turning dirt paths into streams of mud and wooden structures into slick, treacherous hazards. The storm had rolled in overnight, but the schedule never changed. The army didn't stop for weather, and neither did the recruits. Maria stood in formation with the rest of the platoon, uniform already soaked, boots squelching in the muck. Her chest tightened at the sight of the obstacle course, glistening under sheets of rain. Every surface looked like a trap waiting to send her crashing. She forced herself to inhale slowly, exhale, whispering Harris's mantra in her head. "Breathe. Before you move." The whistle blew. Recruits surged forward, mud splashing around their legs as they sprinted. Maria started at her own pace. The first obstacle was the wall she had once dreaded. Rainwater streamed down its surface, making the climb harder than ever. Her palms slipped immediately on her first attempt. For a second, panic flared her old instinct to flail, scrambled desperately. She stopped, pressed her muddy hands against her thighs, inhaled deeply, then tried again. Her fingers gripped the top, muscles strained, but she pulled herself up with controlled force, swinging a leg over. She landed on the other side with a splash of mud. "Come on, Sanchez." Someone shouted, surprised she hadn't fallen. She kept moving. The next obstacle was a low crawl under barbed wire. The ground was a swamp, sucking at her arms and legs as she dragged herself forward. Mud filled her sleeves, stung her eyes, threatened to choke her. For a moment, terror gripped. Her chest, the claustrophobic press of earth and wire above her, making it hard to breathe. She froze, heart racing. Breathe before you move. She forced a breath through clenched teeth, then another. Her lungs steadied, her arms pushed forward again. Inch by inch, she crawled through, emerging soaked, filthy, but alive. By the time she neared the finish line, her body screamed in protest. Rain plastered her hair to her face. Mud weighed her down like armor. Recruits who had sprinted ahead were collapsing, their energy spent in the storm. Maria slowed, inhaled, exhaled, and kept moving. She didn't finish first, but she crossed upright, chest heaving, instead of dragging herself in defeat. Harris stood at the line watching. His nod was almost imperceptible, but Maria felt it like a spark in her veins. The next days blurred into relentless drills. Rifle practice, tactical maneuvers, timed runs, each one a fresh chance for failure. Maria still stumbled, still missed shots, still lagged behind. But something was different now. Each time panic surged, she stopped, writhed, then acted. Her mistakes were fewer, her movements sharper. During rifle qualification, she steadied her weapon, exhaled, squeezed the trigger. The first bullet hit center mass. Her eyes widened. She had missed that target 100 times. She adjusted, breathed again, fired. Another hit. Not perfect, but closer. For the first time, she felt her hands stop shaking at the range. The platoon noticed. "She's getting better," one recruit muttered after a drill. "Better then." "Half of us," another admitted reluctantly. Private Lee, her harshest critic, watched silently as Maria climbed a rope faster than ever before. He didn't mock this time. He just frowned, almost uncertain what to say. Maria didn't bask in it. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt steady, focused. Still, the transformation wasn't smooth. One brutal afternoon, the recruits faced a long-distance endurance run. The sun blazed, humidity clung to the air, and every step felt like dragging chains. Maria started strong, whispering her mantra with every stride. But halfway through, her chest tightened painfully. Her breaths came ragged, uneven. Her legs felt like lead. Her old instincts screamed, "You can't finish. Stop before you collapse." She slowed to a walk, clutching her ribs. Other recruits sped past, glancing back at her with pity. For a moment, despair almost consumed her. "Breathe before you move." She inhaled deeply, forcing air into her burning lungs. One step, exhale. Another step, inhale. Slowly, she picked up her pace again. She finished dead last, staggering across the line, sweat pouring down her face. But she finished. Upright, not carried, not collapsed. Harris was waiting again. He said nothing, just gave her a single deliberate nod. The kind of nod that told her he understood the battle she'd fought. Wasn't against the course, it was against herself. That night, as she collapsed onto her bunk, Maria realized she had started to crave that feeling. Not the nod itself, but the quiet victory of proving her doubts wrong. Weeks passed, and Maria transformed. She wasn't the strongest in the platoon, not the fastest, not the best shot. But she was no longer the weakest. She had carved out something rarer, resilience. Others gave their all in bursts, collapsing when it wasn't enough. Maria had learned to pace herself, to control herself, to keep moving long after her body wanted to give up. The platoon couldn't ignore it. One evening, during a tactical maneuver drill, Maria advanced calmly through simulated gunfire. She paused behind cover, breathed, then moved with precision. Her squad followed her lead instinctively. When the drill ended, one soldier clapped her on the shoulder. "Nice work, Sanchez," he said, genuine this time. Maria blinked, startled. The words weren't sarcastic, weren't mocking. They were respect. It hit her then she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was becoming someone worth following. Harris, true to form, never praised her outright. He never gave long speeches, never explained more than necessary. But his eyes followed her progress. Each time she succeeded, each time she fought through panic, he was there, watching. And Maria realized something profound. The man hadn't saved her with endless instruction or detailed training. He had saved her with restraint. One order, one principle. Enough to unlock a strength she hadn't known she possessed. But her greatest test still loomed. The final combat qualification was approaching the same drill where she had once frozen completely, disgracing herself in front of everyone. The thought of facing it again twisted her stomach. But this time, she wasn't the same Maria who had cowered behind cover. This time, she had a weapon no one could see. Breathe before you move. She whispered it like a prayer each night, preparing herself for the moment that would decide whether her transformation was real or an illusion, waiting to crumble under pressure. The barracks were silent when Maria slipped out of her bunk. The others still slept, their breaths heavy in the darkness, but she was already lacing her boots. She had begun rising before dawn every day, long before reveille, long before the others stirred. The cool pre-dawn air wrapped around her as she stepped outside. Stars still glimmered faintly in the fading night sky, the horizon only beginning to glow with hints of morning light. For Maria, these were the sacred hours, moments no one could take from her, moments she chose for herself. She dropped into push-ups on the damp concrete, her breaths measured and steady. Breathe before you move. Each inhale aligned with her lowering chest. Each exhale pushed her back up. She ran laps around the field, boots pounding a rhythm into the dirt. Her lungs burned, but she refused to stop. When the sun finally rose, painting the world in pale orange, sweat was already pouring down her back, soaking her uniform. By the time the others stumbled awake, Maria had already logged miles, worked her body to the brink, and stood tall, ready for the day. Her transformation didn't go unnoticed. "Does Sanchez ever sleep?" one recruit muttered, watching her during morning drills. "She's out there before the sun," another replied, shaking his head. "I don't know how she does it." At first, their words carried disbelief, maybe even suspicion. But soon, whispers turned into admiration. The soldier who had once been mocked for failures now became a quiet example, one they couldn't ignore. Still, Maria's progress wasn't perfect. One grueling afternoon, under the blistering summer sun, the platoon was ordered into a timed ruck march, miles of trudging with packs that felt heavier than stone. Sweat stung her eyes, salt burning her lips, the straps digging into her shoulders. Her legs trembled with every step, her vision blurring with heat. Halfway through, Maria's body gave in. Her knees buckled, and she crashed to the dirt. The pack slammed into her spine, knocking the air from her lungs. For a moment, she lay there, gasping, staring at the sky. Old doubts surged like shadows. "You're still weak. You'll always be weak. Just stay down." But then, Harris's voice echoed in her head, not shouted, not cruel, but commanding. "Breathe before you move." She inhaled deeply, filling her lungs. With fire, she pushed up slowly, each motion deliberate. Her hands gripped the straps, dragging the pack upright. Her body screamed in protest, but she forced herself onto her feet. One breath, one step, then another, and another. She crossed the finish line last. Her uniform was soaked through, legs quivering like jelly, but she crossed standing, not carried, not broken. Harris stood nearby, as he always seemed to. He gave her a look that wasn't pity, wasn't pride, it was recognition. He knew the battle she had just fought wasn't against weight or distance, but against the temptation to surrender. That night, Maria sat at her bunk, bruised and sore, but smiling faintly. For the first time, she understood. Strength wasn't about winning every battle. It was about refusing to lose the war inside her own head. The next days became a blur of sweat, grit, and quiet victories. On the shooting range, she steadied her rifle, exhaled, and hit targets that once seemed impossible. Her groups tightened, her shots finding center mass more often than not. On the obstacle course, she scaled walls, balanced on beams, and crawled through mud with a calm determination. She didn't rush. She didn't panic. Each movement was precise, controlled. During tactical exercises, her squad began watching her instinctively. She had no rank, no authority, but when she paused behind cover and signaled forward, they followed. When she advanced, they advanced. Her rhythm, her control, spread to them like an unspoken language. Even Lee, who had once been her loudest critic, began keeping pace beside her during runs. He didn't say much, but when she stumbled, he steadied her without a word. Respect wasn't demanded, it was earned. And Maria was earning it. But with progress came new weight. As the final qualification loomed, Maria felt the pressure building. She knew the others expected her to succeed now. She wasn't the platoon's weakest link anymore. She was becoming its heart. If she failed again, it wouldn't just be her shame. It would be a betrayal of the faith slowly forming around her. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of crimson and violet, Harris approached her on the field. She was alone, practicing low crawls, mud clinging to her uniform. "You've changed," he said simply. Maria froze, blinking up at him. Praise wasn't something Harris gave freely, if ever. "I didn't think I could," she admitted softly, voice raw with exhaustion. His gaze held hers, steady as steel. Change comes when failure stops being an enemy and starts being your teacher. He paused. "Remember that when the test comes." Then he turned and walked away, leaving her with those words. That night, Maria lay awake in her bunk, replaying them over and over. She had spent months fearing failure, avoiding it, hiding from it. But now, she realized it had been failure that had forged her strength. Every stumble, every collapse, every humiliation had been shaping her for this moment. And tomorrow, she would face the final test, no longer as the soldier who failed every drill, but as the one who had learned to breathe, to endure, to fight. The dawn of her reckoning was near. The morning of the qualification dawned heavy and gray, clouds sagging low over the training grounds, as if the sky itself carried the weight of expectation. The final combat drill was notorious, whispered about among recruits like a legend. It was the test that weeded out the weak, that exposed hesitation, that decided who had the steel to wear the uniform proudly. For Maria, it was also the site of her deepest shame. Months earlier, she had frozen here, unable to move, her fear so paralyzing that instructors had dragged her off the field. That memory clawed at her gut now, threatening to unravel all she had built. As she sat on her bunk, lacing her boots with steady hands, she whispered the words that had carried her this far. "Breathe before you move." She let her lungs expand slowly, and released the breath like a promise. This time she would not freeze. This time she would not let fear own her. The platoon assembled outside. Faces were grim, eyes sharp. Every soldier knew the stakes. Pass, and you proved yourself. Fail, and you carried the mark of it for the par. Rest of your career. Drill instructors barked orders as they herded the recruits toward the course. It sprawled across acres of mud and dirt, a nightmare of obstacles strung together with barbed wire, smoke grenades, and live gunfire snapping. Overhead, explosions punctuated the air as demolition squads simulated battlefield chaos. Maria's pulse quickened at the sight, but she closed her eyes briefly, inhaled, and steadied herself. "Remember your order," Harris said quietly as he passed, by his presence like an anchor in the storm. That was all. Nothing more. And then the whistle blew. Chaos erupted. Recruits surged forward, diving for cover as machine gun fire rattled from towers. Smoke billowed across the field, choking the air, reducing vision to a haze of gray. Maria dropped low, crawling beneath the barbed wire as rounds cracked overhead. Mud smeared across her face, stung her eyes, but she didn't rush. She breathed, then moved, each inch deliberate, each motion controlled. Beside her, Private Lee cursed as the wire snagged his pack. He panicked, yanking hard, wasting time. Maria reached back, tapped his arm, and gestured for him to breathe. He met her eyes, confused, but followed her lead. They both slipped free, pushing forward together. The next obstacle loomed, a series of towering walls slick with mud. Recruits scrambled, slipping, falling, shouting in frustration. Maria approached hers, palms pressed flat, and paused. She inhaled deeply, then exploded upward, catching the ledge. Her muscles strained, her body threatened to slip, but she exhaled slowly, pulled steadily, and swung her leg over. She dropped to the far side, landing solidly. "Move!" a voice shouted. She turned, saw two recruits struggling with their wall. Without thinking, she braced herself, locking her hands together as a foothold. "Go!" she ordered. They stepped into her grip, climbed higher, and cleared the wall. When it was her turn again, they reached down, dragging her up and over. Already, the platoon was following her rhythm. A course funneled them into a trench, deep and narrow, water rushing at their boots. Explosions boomed overhead, the earth trembling with each blast. One recruit stumbled, dropping his rifle into the muck. Maria's instinct screamed to keep running, but she stopped. She seized the rifle, shoved it back into his hands, and pushed him forward. Her chest burned with effort, but her mind was calm. Breathe, then move. That order kept her centered as chaos swirled. Halfway through, they hit the kill house, a dark, echoing building filled with smoke and blaring sirens. Targets popped up, without warning, and recruits had to identify and fire instantly. Maria entered cautiously, rifle raised. A target sprang to her right hostile. She exhaled, squeezed the trigger. Bang! The target dropped. Another appeared civilian. She held her fire, inhaled, shifted, then advanced. Her focus was razor-sharp. Every decision filtered through the rhythm of her breathing. By the time she exited the kill house, her shots were clean, her pace steady. She emerged to find several recruits waiting, breathing hard, looking to her without realizing it. "What now?" one asked. The question stunned her. She wasn't in charge, at least not officially. But in that moment, under fire, it didn't matter. They trusted her calm. They trusted her control. Maria scanned the field. Ahead lay the final gauntlet, open ground under heavy fire, ending with a fortified position they had to storm. She inhaled, exhaled, and spoke clearly, low and slow. "We move on my count. Breathe, then move." They nodded, no hesitation. "Go!" She surged forward, belly to the ground, mud soaking through her uniform as bullets cracked overhead. The recruits moved with her, their timing syncing unconsciously with her steady rhythm. Inch by inch, they advanced. At the final barricade, she paused, inhaled deeply, then signaled. Together, they vaulted the cover, stormed the position, rifles barking. Targets dropped one by one. The whistle blew, signaling completion. Silence followed, broken only by the sound of recruits panting, gasping, staring in disbelief. Maria stood in the mud, chest heaving, rifle lowered. For a heartbeat, she thought she might collapse. But then she realized she wasn't broken. She wasn't frozen. She had finished strong. And not just finish, she had led. The instructors recorded scores, murmuring among themselves. Harris approached slowly, eyes fixed on her. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, with the faintest curve of his lips, he spoke. "You didn't just pass," he said. "You proved you belong here." The words struck harder than any explosion. Maria swallowed, fighting the lump in her throat. She wanted to speak, to thank him, to say everything this moment meant. But all she managed was a shaky nod. Around her, the platoon erupted in cheers, clapping her on the back, calling her name. Lee grinned openly, no longer her critic, but her brother in arms. Maria Sanchez, the recruit who once failed every drill, had just led her squad through the hardest test of their training. And in that moment, with mud caked on her skin and her chest burning with pride, she knew she was no longer the soldier who doubted herself. She was the soldier who breathed, the soldier who moved, the soldier who endured. The morning of graduation dawned crisp and clear, the sun slicing through the mist like a promise. The training grounds, which had felt merciless for months, now appeared calm, almost welcoming. Flags snapped in the light breeze as the recruits lined up, uniforms pressed, boots shining, despite the months of mud, sweat, and tears. Maria stood among them, shoulders squared, posture straight. The mirror of her reflection showed a soldier transformed, not just in body, but in spirit. Her uniform fit snug, no longer a symbol of struggle, but a badge of hard-earned perseverance. She could almost hear Harris's words in the wind. "Breathe before you move." For weeks, the platoon had rehearsed the drill for this day. Every move had been practiced, every formation memorized. But today wasn't about perfection. It was about acknowledgement. Every grunt, every fall, every struggle had brought them here. The commanding officer began the ceremony, speaking about the trials of the training program, about the importance of courage, determination, and resilience. Maria's gaze drifted over the faces of her fellow recruits. Some had been born strong, fast, confident from day one. Others had stumbled, fallen, and clawed their way forward. She had been the last, the weakest, the one everyone thought would quit. She remembered the cold, rainy mornings, the nights she spent alone practicing, the burning muscles, the humiliation, the doubt. She thought of every failure and every whispered word of mockery that had once felt like knives in her back. Penned? She remembered Harris. He had never cheered her on. He had never shouted encouragement or made speeches. He had simply stood there, observing, asking one question, giving one command. That restraint had forced her to find strength inside herself, to rely on what she could control: her breathing, her focus, her will. The officer called the names of recruits as they received their completion certificates. One by one, they stepped forward, shaking hands, smiles bright, families clapping in the stands beyond the fences. Maria Sanchez. The world seemed to tilt. Every eye in the formation and every instructor's gaze turned toward her. She stepped forward, boots crunching against the gravel, heart hammering. The applause felt unreal, as if the sound itself were a manifestation of all her months of struggle. The commanding officer extended the certificate. "Private Sanchez," he said, voice steady, "for exemplary perseverance and dedication. You have completed the program." Your journey is a testament to determination in the face of failure. Maria took the certificate, shaking slightly. She nodded, words failing her. A glance toward Harris revealed him standing at the back of the formation. No smile, no fanfare, just a small nod of recognition. It meant more than any medal, more than any public acknowledgement. That single nod was the culmination of her journey. Silent confirmation that she had become the soldier he believed she could be. The platoon gathered afterward for photos, laughter, and camaraderie. Maria found herself surrounded by those who had once doubted her, those who had mocked her, those who had ignored her. And now they celebrated her as one of their own. Private. Lee clapped her on the shoulder, grinning. You did it, Sanchez. You really did it. I couldn't have done it without all of you, Maria replied softly, realizing the truth in the words. Each struggle, each failure, had been shared, and every one of them had shaped her. As the ceremony wound down, Maria slipped away from the crowd and found a quiet spot near the edge of the field. She pulled out a letter she had carried with her since the first day of training. It was from her mother, words penned in careful handwriting. No matter what happens, you have our pride. You can do anything you set your mind to. Never forget where you come from. Tears stung her eyes. She pressed the letter to her chest, feeling the weight of sacrifice, of love, of expectation she had carried for months. She whispered a promise to herself and to her family. She would live up to it. She had already begun. Harris appeared beside her without a sound. He had been watching, as always, observing quietly. He didn't speak for several moments, merely surveying the horizon, then glancing down at Maria. You've changed, he said simply. Maria looked at him, searching for more words, for some indication of approval beyond the quiet statement. I know, she whispered. He nodded once, slowly, deliberately. Strength isn't just about what you can lift or how fast you can run. It's about what you do when you're afraid, when you're tired, when the world expects you to fail. You learned that. Maria felt something shift inside her. Recognition, yes, but more than that. She felt the weight of her own accomplishment, the reality that she had transformed, not because anyone had pushed her, but because she had fought through her own doubts and weaknesses. She had learned to control herself, and that control had become power. The rest of the platoon found her, and she returned to their midst, laughing quietly, arms around the shoulders of those who had become her brothers and sisters in arms. They didn't need words. They had all fought together, endured together, and now celebrated together. As the sun climbed higher, Maria allowed herself to look back over the months she had endured. The endless drills, the relentless exercises, the failures that once defined her, they were all behind her. What mattered now was the soldier she had become, the person she had proven herself to be. And though the path had been brutal, each struggle had shaped her into someone she respected deeply. She could see her family's faces in her mind, imagining their pride, imagining the stories they would tell when she returned home. And she knew that every blister, every scrape, every tear had been worth it. She had finally become the soldier she had promised herself she would be. Harris placed a hand lightly on her shoulder, a rare gesture of connection. Don't forget this, he said. Remember the control, remember the calm. You'll need it in ways you haven't even imagined. Maria nodded, understanding that her journey wasn't over. The army would challenge her in ways she could not yet foresee, but she had learned the tools she needed to succeed, to survive, to lead. And now she had confidence, not arrogance, but steady, unwavering self-belief. As the ceremony concluded, the recruits marched off the field, voices raised in cheer, boots hitting the ground in a unified rhythm. Maria fell in line with them, head high, heart steady. She had come so far from the girl who had frozen in the mud, the girl who had been mocked and doubted. She had been broken, but she had rebuilt herself from the inside out. And though the applause faded into the distance, she carried its echo inside her, a quiet, steady affirmation that she had earned her place. Maria Sanchez, once the weakest, had finally stood tall. The training grounds had quieted. The echoes of shouts, gunfire, and whistles that had once defined every waking moment had faded into memory. Maria walked among the grass, now soft underfoot, her boots brushing against dew that clung to each blade. For months, this place had been relentless, a crucible of pain, sweat, and endless tests, but now it felt almost serene. She carried her uniform with a sense of pride that had been foreign to her when she first arrived. Every mud-streaked, sweat-soaked, blistered day had led her here. The girl who had trembled in the rain, frozen at the wall, who had nearly quit. Under the weight of shame had been forged into something new. A soldier, tested and proven. The platoon gathered in loose clusters, some leaning on rifles, others stretching, sharing quiet laughter. It was a contrast to the tense, chaotic energy of the past weeks. Maria watched them with a mixture of nostalgia and pride. These were the people who had witnessed her failures, her struggles, and her breakthroughs. They had seen her at her lowest, and at her strongest. Private Lee approached her, a grin tugging at his lips. "Never thought I'd say this, Sanchez. You actually taught me something." She laughed softly. "Me? I was just surviving." "No," he said, shaking his head. "You were leading." Maria thought back to the course, the walls, the barbed wire, the smoke. Every moment of panic, every failure she had endured it, had all culminated in that leadership. She had never held rank, never given orders formally, but her calm under fire, her steady pace, her unwavering focus, those had spoken louder than words ever could. The platoon had followed her because she had mastered herself. A few soldiers approached, quietly thanking her for helping them through drills, for setting a pace they could rely on. Maria nodded to each of them, offering a smile, understanding that her victories had always been shared, that leadership was not about titles, but about example. Harris appeared quietly behind her, as he always did. She didn't startle. She had learned to expect his presence, his observation. He didn't speak at first, simply watching the platoon, taking measure of each recruit, each posture, each expression. Finally, he turned to her. "You're ready?" he said simply. Maria blinked. "Ready for what?" "Everything that comes next," he replied. His tone was calm, unassuming, but full of weight. "You know how to control fear, to focus, to lead without shouting. That's more than most ever learn here. Don't forget it." She nodded, letting the words settle into her bones. "I won't." "Sir." He studied her for a long moment. "Good. Now go. Be the soldier you've proven yourself to be." And with that, he walked away, leaving her with an echo of the man who had changed everything with one simple order. Breathe before you move. Alone, Maria looked out over the training grounds, imagining the countless hours she had spent here. Rain-soaked mornings, endless repetitions, the sting of failure, it all led to this moment. Her mind wandered to her family, to the letters from home, the hopes they had carried for her success. She pictured their pride, their relief, and allowed herself a private smile. Every early morning, every fall, every bruise had been worth it. In the weeks after graduation, Maria found herself stepping into responsibilities she had once thought impossible. She trained new recruits, showing them how to maintain composure under pressure, how to control fear and panic. She taught them what Harris had taught her, not with speeches, but with example. Each calm breath, each deliberate movement became a lesson in its own right. The soldiers she mentored respected her. They trusted her not because she demanded it, but because she had earned it. Maria realized that the strength she had cultivated and herself could now be shared, multiplying its effect. She was no longer just surviving. She was shaping others, guiding them through the same challenges she had faced. But Maria never forgot her own journey, the fear, the failures, the shame. She carried it like a quiet reminder that every soldier begins somewhere, that each stumble could be the prelude to greatness if met with determination. She knew she would face new trials, new obstacles, new moments where her courage would be tested. But she was no longer the girl who froze at the first wall. She had learned to breathe, to focus, to endure. One evening, she stood on a hill overlooking the base, the sun dipping low, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold. Harris appeared beside her silently. She didn't look at him immediately, simply letting the warmth of the setting sun wash over her. "You've come far," he said quietly, almost conversationally. Maria turned, meeting his gaze. "Thanks." "To you, sir?" He shook his head. "No, you did this yourself. I only gave you a choice and a reminder. You built the rest." She felt a lump in her throat, not just for gratitude, but for understanding. Months of sweat, struggle, and resilience had distilled into that moment. She had earned his words, earned the nods, earned the trust of her platoon, earned herself. The sun disappeared behind the horizon, leaving a soft twilight. Maria exhaled slowly, letting her shoulders relax. She had become the soldier she had always dreamed of being. The girl who had failed every combat drill, who had been mocked and doubted, was gone. In her place stood someone disciplined, composed, and ready for whatever lay ahead. As the stars appeared, she thought of Harris's first command: breathe. Before you move. It had been so simple, so easy to dismiss. Yet it had been the key to everything: control, resilience, confidence, leadership. She smiled, realizing that one order had changed the course of her life. The base was quiet now, the echoes of drills and chaos long gone. But Maria knew that the lessons, the strength, and the confidence she had gained would follow her wherever she went. In every challenge, in every battle, she would remember the calm in the storm, the power of focus, the courage to move forward when fear screamed to stop. She turned back toward the barracks, toward her platoon, toward the future that awaited her. Maria Sanchez, once the weakest link, was now the measure by which others would learn strength. And as she walked into the fading light, she carried with her the quiet, steady knowledge that she was ready for anything. Because she had learned to breathe. Because she had learned to move. Because she had learned to endure and to lead. The soldier she had become was unstoppable.